All right, welcome to SolarEdge Energy Meters. Today we're going to be talking through some new products and some existing products that some of you may or may not have heard about already in the realm of energy meters. My name is Mike Rogerson. I'm Director of Marketing for SolarEdge. Joining me today will be Cameron Stewart, West Coast Apps Engineer.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
So a little bit about energy meters and why we're looking at energy meters. We see a big problem with cancellations in the industry, and we'll walk through kind of the numbers of that and how that affects your business. We'll talk about some of the lessons we've uncovered on reducing cancellations and some of the benchmarking we've done with other industries. We'll talk about what the energy meters do for you and for the homeowners. And lastly, we'll run through how to install them so you'll have an idea in your head what you need to do to build these into your systems in the future. So the problem with cancellations, as you probably know, if you've seen these webinars from SolarEdge in the past, one of the big themes that we're looking at is the industry is not growing as much as it has in the past. 2017 was the first year of retraction of growth for about a decade in the US residential industry. And Green Tech Media is projecting for this year and 2019 not much growth really going forward. In effect, what I'm hearing from Intersolar, it was a large trade show we had out here in California last week, is some investors are expecting Q3 to be a little soft. So, we're just not seeing the strong growth and the easy growth for businesses that we saw in the last 10 years. They're going to be about 350,000 installations. That was true last year. It's true this year. It's true next year. So the volume isn't necessarily increasing. At the same time, your dollar per watt that you're getting for these installations is not really increasing. In some markets, it's decreasing. So how do you drive revenue growth for your business? Every time we've polled our installer base, we find that the vast majority, 80%, expect to grow revenue in the next couple of years. And that'll obviously be a challenge when the market's not growing and the dollar per watt is declining. But there are ways to do that. Obviously, raising prices and revenue per job is going to be the big thing. That's the big goal that everybody has. So you need to decouple your project revenue from dollar per watt, and the best way to do that is by adding storage. So we run a webinar on storage. Join us for that or see the recorded version of that. We'll talk about that heavily and how you can drive your business economics using storage to increase revenue. We also have a webinar called 5 to 50 where we talk about managing the funnel in general. So if you think of a typical market funnel, you go out, you get a lot of leads, and then by the end of the day, you have a couple customers that kind of work their way through this funnel. So increasing the top of the funnel and customer outreach is a major initiative in that. We have a 5 to 50 webinar series where we talk about some business consulting. We brought in some outside support for that. That's on our webinar channels as well. We've talked about increasing conversions. In the last webinar we did was on EV charging inverters, and we talked about how to use those products to help your conversion rate. Today we're going to focus on reducing cancellations, and we're going to talk about energy meters. So what is the impact of a cancellation? So here's a plot of information from Green Tech Media, and they're running through a scenario. It's an example that they're putting out there on what customer acquisition costs could be. In this example, there's an installer who invests $10,000 to get 200 leads. And it doesn't really matter what mechanism that investment was. Maybe you went online and bought the leads. Maybe you're hiring phone salespeople. Maybe you're hiring door-to-door salespeople. Maybe you had an event and it cost you $10,000 and at the end of it you have 200 leads. All of those mechanisms don't really matter. We're just looking at the numbers and the impact of the numbers. So you have a batch of 200. At the end of that, you kind of qualify about 10%. So you get down to 10. These are pretty standard numbers we've seen in the industry. And then out of those 20 qualified leads, you might get 4 of them to actually sign a contract with you. And you'll see here that, $2,500. So these numbers are increasing. Every time you disqualify and every time your customer base shrinks, the initial investment didn't shrink, but your final number of installations is shrinking. So that is getting more and more expensive. So when you have that fourth column here where you have a cancellation and you end up netting 3 customers, it actually increases your cost for those 3 customers because you lost one of them. And so when we look at what a cancellation does to your business, it's increasing the cost of customer acquisition. And if they don't cancel, or you can reduce the percentage of customers who are canceling, then that's going to lower your cost of customer acquisition, which is a major initiative for the US industry. It's very expensive to acquire customers here. And so anytime you can reduce your cancellation, and in this Green Tech Media example, they're showing a savings of a little over $800 to reduce that one customer who canceled. So there's definite value on the table to do this. And we're going to look at a product today that we believe can help you reduce that number. So first of all, let's look at some benchmarking in the medical industry. This is what I uncovered. It was looking at cancellation rates, why do customers cancel, how to reduce it. And the first couple pages of Google results were all about the medical industry. So I was kind of surprised by that, and kind of dig into it and do a little bit of the research, and you can see some of the links that I've used down here in the bottom. They're seeing patients leave treatment, or they come to the hospital, they check in, and then they leave and they don't see the doctor. And so they're listing a number of reasons for cancellation. And some of the things they've uncovered is just difficulty logistically getting a patient to the appointment. And that's kind of difficult time slots, and trying to have customers drive in high traffic periods. The nice thing with solar is we don't really have to worry about that too much. In general, we're going to the customer's site, their home, and we're installing there. So the logistics of the appointment is not so much about them traveling somewhere, it's more about them being on site. And so it's easier for us to manage, I think, than the medical industry. Constant communication with customers. So this is about keeping them on schedule and letting them know when they have to be somewhere, or when we're going to be at their home. Proper expectations, not set ahead of time. So if you think about like a medical appointment, you're nervous, you're not sure what they're going to do. There are shots involved, or something more extensive than shots. You get nervous ahead of time, which makes the fourth one really difficult, and that's these long waiting times in the waiting room. So we're going to talk about how to port some of the lessons that the medical field has learned over the last 50 years or so to reduce cancellations. We're going to see if we can apply that to solar. The first one is on communication. So one of the methodologies that they use is this 3-3-1 communications, which I think is a good tool. They're looking at notifications. You send them out to a customer 3 weeks out. You get on the calendar. 3 days out, you kind of remind them, get top of mind. 1 day out, because everybody forgets everything that doesn't happen, that happens too far in the future. And that's kind of this 3-3-1 idea. And so they're looking at notifications going to customers 3 weeks, 3 days, and 1 day. The second layer to that is how you're notifying the customers. And they found that not everybody responds to phone calls, not everybody responds to emails. And especially nowadays, when we have these smartphones and these apps on them, some people are just relying on the app to tell them what to do and where to go. So make sure you have kind of all the channels covered. You've got emails that are going out and scheduling customers. You've got phone calls going out to the customers that need that. And then, get the invitation on their calendar, so it's notifying them on the app, or if you're able to have some type of scheduling app, that's a good tool as well. On setting expectations, this one's definitely for solar a major piece of how we sell solar. So a lot of our solar installations up until now have been sold on an ROI basis, return on investment. We're saying the payback period will be 5 years or 7 years. We're running this long Excel model. And so this should feel very comfortable to anyone in the solar industry, is how to set up proper expectations for future returns. And so we look at things like the energy projection, we look at the electrical rate that they're going to pay, we look at degradation values, because we're running this over a 20-year time period. And then we're also looking at, now one of the new things is integrating batteries. And so how do you integrate a battery into a customer's electrical bill? There's not enough information there to do that. You need to know when they buy electricity during the day. Do they use it later in the day? Do they use it in the middle of the day, in the morning, at nighttime? So getting that profile is important to your ability to selling batteries and selling a solution for time of use shifting or demand charge mitigation. So these are kind of critical pieces in setting up the solar expectations for the customers. The last one's kind of interesting. So, we mentioned it, you're nervous, you're sitting in the waiting room. 50 years ago, you used to sit in the waiting room for maybe 30 minutes. I remember when I was a lot younger, it seemed like you're sitting in the waiting room with a 10-year-old magazine for a very long time. They put you back, they do some quick measurements, the doctor sees you right away, and then you're out. Recently, when I've gone to the doctor, they've changed this, and I think this is kind of, people leaving the waiting room early. They get nervous, they can just walk out of the waiting room easily. So they're getting rid of the waiting room, and they're going into what I would call like a diagnostics phase of the visit. They take you back, somebody does your basic measurements, height, weight, and they do the blood pressure, and that takes time, and they ask a bunch of questions. And then you're no longer in the waiting room, usually sitting back in like a visitation room or diagnostics room. That's where the doctor will come and see you, but the same amount of time didn't really change. So either you're sitting in the waiting room for 30 minutes or you're sitting in that diagnostic space for 30 minutes. The total time for the doctor really didn't shift, but what shifted was where you are and where you believe you are in the process. So if you've already been taken out of the waiting room, you've talked to a nurse, maybe you're nervous about things, you can kind of talk through that nervousness. And what's also important is you've begun the process, so you're starting to actively do things. So this is really important because we have a solar waiting room. And so one of the things that we're looking at is the time between contract signature to installation. So the contract discussion is pretty in depth. You're sitting there face to face with the homeowner, you're running through the benefits of solar, the financial side of it. There's a lot of interaction. It's with a salesperson. It's a high level of intimacy in the contract signing. And then once that contract's signed, how long is it until you see them face to face again and actually conduct an installation? So that's a question we want to ask. We want to get a sense for how big the solar waiting room is and how many days do you normally spend on average with between contract and installation. And we're going to run a quick poll here. Let me go ahead and launch this. We have a couple answers for you. So how many days do you spend between contract and installation? Less than 7 days, like you're able to do this within a week. 8 to 30 days, so you're able to do this more than a week, less than a month. And then you're kind of looking at more than a month, less than 2 months. And in some areas, we're actually seeing times as long as 60 days. So we'll give a couple minutes to let everyone respond there. Okay, so keep in mind before I share the results, we have 150 people on this webinar right now. And so this is showing results over a pretty wide demographic. And you can see less than 7 days, like 6%. So, we're just not Amazon yet. We're not doing the Amazon Prime level of service. Getting less than 7 days, I'm impressed that there are 6% who are able to go from contract to installation. I'm not overly surprised because I have seen it in my neighborhood. And then what I was really interested in, Cameron, to your point, you got 10% are showing more than 60 days. So, that's a significant size of the industry that's waiting longer than 2 months to do their installation. Kind of the more than 1 month, less than 2 month period. So the definite cooling off for more than half of the people, and more than 30 days. I think that's a definite cooling off period there. I'm not sure what the gun laws are in California, but I think you can actually buy a gun quicker than you can buy solar, according to this study. So you've got less than 30 days, 46%, more than 30 days, 54%. So the majority of people are having to wait more than 30 days in the industry, which is definitely it's significant from that point of view. All right, so let me go ahead and hide that. All right, so what does an energy meter do? Well, obviously, we would not be talking so much about the solar waiting room if it did not eliminate it. So just like the medical industry, we're taking people out of the waiting room, we're putting them into a diagnostics room. We want to do that virtually for customers in the solar industry. So this is the most important thing that this energy meter will allow you to do. This is the energy meter with GSM connection. What's cool about this meter is that it is a standalone product that does not require a solar installation. It has a GSM connection, which means it can report directly to the cloud, the customer's consumption, and it will run off of its own power connection, and it just monitors the home consumption. So it's going to sit there and keep track of what they buy from the grid, and it's going to do that for as long as you want them to do it. Some of the benefits are it's going to clarify the expectations for the customer. So it's going to demonstrate the need for solar by showing them visually through an app on their phone, on their smartphone, that they're using energy. It's going to show them how much energy they're using. What's very cool about this is it's going to calculate their future savings. So it's constantly reminding them month to month what their estimated solar production would have been and what their financial reward or financial return would have been for that month, how much they would have saved. So it's going to keep reminding them, keep them excited about going solar with real-time data on their consumption and then monthly updates on their estimated solar energy production and their bill reduction. One of the other things that it's going to allow you to do is it's going to show you the potential for a battery by showing the actual profile that homeowner has. So do they use energy more late in the afternoon? Like if you're in California and you're on a time of use rate, that could be more expensive that you're buying that energy late in the afternoon than if you buy it at noontime. So it may benefit them more to have a battery. If you're in Arizona or a demand charge, you can see if they're spiking demand at certain points in time during the day where batteries and other demand mitigation mechanisms may help them. So it's an ability to customize their installation even after the contract. Maybe you can go back and revise the contract to add batteries or add demand response technologies. The last thing that's kind of on here, we do integrate with Designer. So we have another webinar on Designer. Designer is an online tool, so you can use 3D modeling to design a solar system on your rooftop. It's free for SolarEdge users. And so definitely use that if you're not already. We are integrating with Designer to give you an estimated production value. And so that'll go in here and that'll help you figure out what your bill reduction is. So all of that is with the Energy Meter with GSM connection. Some of the benefits after the solar is installed. So all of that is kind of in that what we say, 30 to 60 day period where it seemed like most of the data was. That 30 to 60 day period, they're going to be generating all of this information about their consumption. They're going to see their potential savings once they go solar. And now the day comes, you install the solar installation, and it's still providing value, which is a good benefit as well. The first thing to know is there's one app. If you're a Lord of the Rings fan, it's one app to rule them all. So the same app that you're using to monitor your solar is now going to incorporate consumption monitoring data to it. It's going to be, so the original device, the original consumption or the energy meter is a cellular connection. So we're going to leverage that same cellular connection to report your solar data. So there's no need to run another Ethernet cable, set up a Zigbee network, or purchase another cellular card with a data plan. Because it is cellular, we also get this third benefit. We're going to eliminate the reliance on the homeowner's internet. So if we do run an Ethernet and they unplug it for some reason or they move the router, you're not losing communications and monitoring the health of that system. You're still able to maintain that monitoring because it is over a cellular connection. In markets with zero export rules, you can open that market with export limitation with this device. The last two here are kind of interesting. It's going to eliminate, has the potential to eliminate service calls. Let me describe what's happening in this case. So you go solar as a homeowner and you see your energy bill is low. The next thing you do is you turn your air conditioner down a little bit more. You're a little bit more comfortable. Maybe 6 months from now you buy an electric vehicle and you have to start charging that electric vehicle and you're putting in 10 kilowatt hours a night into that electric vehicle. The next month your bill comes in and it's high again. It's higher than it was before you went solar. So without this kind of information, your next call is to the installer saying, my solar system doesn't work. My bill is just as high as it was before, and it's not working. You need to come out here and fix it. What this system allows you to do is now they can go on their phone, and because they're seeing their home consumption, they can get an idea already ahead of time. Oh yeah, my electric vehicle is charging at night, and that's why my bill's high. Or, oh yeah, I've been running the air conditioner more, and so I see more of that red on my plot. You see here, this 3-color plot down here shows you the red, which is you're buying from the utility. The green is solar production. The blue is what you're self-consuming. So that's what you've produced and you're consuming either real time or with a battery, like in this case, later on in the afternoon. So they're going to have that information and be able to self-diagnose what's going on. If they can't self-diagnose, then that brings us to the last bit. They're going to call you and you can diagnose it remotely from the computer using this information, and it puts the ability for you to sell them a future upgrade on the table. So if they buy that electric vehicle or they're using more air conditioning, they just need more energy. We have an EV charger. We have an EV charger integrated inverter. We have a battery. Maybe you can look at a battery storage if they're running a time of use rate, and that's the reason why their bill's high. Or you can upgrade their PV system to install a little bit more solar. So a lot of times with an electric vehicle, people can use 10 to 15 kilowatt hours more, which is a 2 to 3 kilowatt extra PV system. So an expansion on the PV system, maybe an upgrade to storage, maybe an upgrade to EV charging. So those are all the different options that can open up your commercial channel. Some of the benefits for the homeowners, I think we've touched on most of this. They're going to get their consumption profile before and after the solar. They do see projected savings from the solar system, so they're reminded about a financial return once this system is in there, and they're less likely to walk away from that. So kind of an effect, a psychological effect that pretty much all humans have, is we like to spend money we don't have. So the second you see money, it's spent mentally, right? So you see this on your cell phone, you say 150 bucks. Wow, if I had solar, I'd have an extra 150 bucks in my pocket. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to spend it. I'm going to buy something that I've wanted to buy. So that's all kind of integrated there. The last thing, and this is kind of if you just have standard solar installation and you have the SolarEdge monitoring, you see a green blob, for lack of a better term, shows you the sun goes up, the sun goes down, and people lose interest. It's not that exciting. It's just basic monochromatic graphical display, and that's really it. You're just seeing your production. What you get when you add in consumption is you get an upgrade to the monitoring experience for the homeowner. So you get this widget, which I'm showing on the top, which shows solar production, shows a picture of the home, which is home consumption, and then we're showing you what you're exporting or importing from the grid. In this case, we also have a battery, so we're able to see what the battery state of charge is. But with consumption, you're kind of getting those three columns that show you the interplay of energy in the home. The other piece that we're adding is multicolor graphical display. So we're going away from the green blob, and now you're seeing the consumption, the self-consumption, and the production all in your device, where the blue is your self-consumption, the red is your purchase from the grid, and then your green is your production from solar above and beyond what you're actually consuming. So multicolor graphical display, widget display, a big upgrade into that monitoring platform. All right, now I'm going to pass it over to Cameron. He's going to walk you through how to install these devices.
Sweet. Mike, can you pass me the mouse functionality as well? So my name is Cameron Stewart. I'm the West Coast Applications Engineer here at SolarEdge. You might have seen my amazing videos on YouTube or on our website, or you might have seen me at a trade show wearing this awesome Madonna microphone. So I'm going to go through how to install the cellular energy meter. So first, I like to open up with a little bit of terminology, and you might have heard Mike say consumption and import and export, and what are all these things? So basically, all the cellular meter is, it's an import-export meter, and we're just measuring energy coming and going from the house. Now, of course, we don't have the solar PV system installed yet, which is why my inverter is kind of grayed out here. We're not going to be exporting. We're only going to be importing. So we're purchasing power. Consumption just measures power that's consumed by the site, and then self-consumption would be solar energy that's consumed and produced by the site. But again, self-consumption is not going to happen until you get that PV inverter installed. Okay, so what is the energy meter with GSM connection? So it's a standalone home consumption meter. So it's really SolarEdge's first standalone product that you can install without a solar inverter. So it can be installed prior to the PV system installation. It does fully integrate, just like Mike demonstrated with our monitoring platform. And the most important thing is it communicates via cellular connection. Why that's important is because your sales guy can go get the contract signed and say, my electrician is going to be here tomorrow to install the cellular meter, and everything's done out by the service entrance. Because it's got a cell card, you don't have to have access to the homeowner's house. You don't have to go inside for anything. Everything can be done outside, so you don't impact your homeowner schedule with another day, right? So the data plan is included, and there will be other plans available online. So what is in the energy meter? So first, of course, we have the consumption meter, the energy meter, and it has CTs that are going to wrap around the feeders to the service entrance, and it's a plus or minus 1% accuracy. Then we give you the enclosure, the NEMA 3R gateway and enclosure. So what's important about this is not all consumption meters give you an enclosure. They expect you to buy your own enclosure or mount it inside the service entrance, and there's never enough space for anything. So we give you the enclosure. And then we give you a way to control and talk to the meter through a standard product we have here at SolarEdge called the CCG, stands for Control and Communication Gateway. Basically, all it is a display that has the cellular card mounted inside of it. So here's the cellular card. Again, the 5-year data plan. And when you integrate this product with the PV inverter, the PV inverter is going to use the gateway's cellular card to transmit the power production. So you don't have to double up on cell cards or communication devices. It's all integrated into the gateway. Oops, a little too fast, sorry. So here's what the enclosure looks like with everything installed, and there's a number of things that are factory installed and factory programmed to make the installation very easy to do. So as we discussed, here's the CCG with the screen, and then over here on the left-hand side is our consumption meter, and then on the bottom here, I want to draw your attention to these terminal blocks. That's going to be for your power input, and then we're going to also have our CTs installed, and then on the right-hand side, I want to draw your attention to this black circle. This is where our conduit entry is going to go. So let's talk about how to install. First, we're going to mount the bracket. So bracket, just mount it on the wall within 8 feet of the service entrance, because your limiting factor is going to be the length of wire on the CTs. So mount it as close as you can to the service entrance. So make sure those semicircles face down. Before you put the NEMA 3R enclosure, the box, onto the bracket, I always recommend you drill out the conduit hole, and it looks like my image is a little squished here, but I use a unibit or step-up bit for this. Some people use a paddle bit, which kind of chunks out the plastic, so I don't like using a paddle bit, but a hole saw also works. Unibit is a standard thing that all installers have on the truck. So once the hole is drilled, you're going to open up the enclosure, or you probably did that before you drilled the hole. And then after everything's open and you have your hole drilled, you're going to mount the box, the NEMA 3R box, to the mounting bracket. Okay, after that's done, we're going to run our conduit, and we're going to attach our conduit to the NEMA 3R box and then to the service entrance. And we're going to pull 4 AC wires. So we're going to pull a line 1, a line 2, a neutral, and ground. 12 gauge wires will suffice. This thing doesn't draw a lot of current, and you're going to attach it to a 2-pole 15 amp breaker. And then you're also, at the same time, you're going to pull your CT wires. So you want to make sure that you have your CT wires running through that same conduit. So if you have already attached the breaker, the 2-pole 15 amp breaker to the bus, make sure it's off, so you're not, so you don't have any potential of risk. But you're going to run the antenna, the cellular antenna cable, out through the cable gland, and you're going to attach the antenna to the top of the enclosure. And then I always say start with your grounding cable first, and that's going to mount on this grounding bar here. It's kind of hard to see, my picture is a little small. And then you're going to connect your AC wires to the gray terminal blocks. I think I have another slide. Great. So how do I connect the AC wires? So on this terminal block here on the bottom left-hand side, you're just going to put your flat blade screwdriver into the square hole to open up the clamp, and then you're going to land your stripped conductor. About a 1/2 inch of insulation to a full inch of insulation should be stripped off the conductor, and you're going to land those conductors in the round hole. So they will be labeled line 1, line 2, and neutral. So make sure you land all those conductors there. You pull the screwdriver out, and then just give it a good tug test and make sure it's landed appropriately. Then we're going to land our CTs. Now our CTs, I have a twisted pair, a black and a white wire. Okay, and they're going to land into these 3 ports here. I think I've got a better image. Yep, I've got a better image right here, and they're labeled with a black and a white circle. So obviously the black wire goes to the black circle and the white wire goes to the white circle. And all you got to do is pull out this little 2-pin terminal block to make it easier to install, land your wires, and then push that 2-pin terminal block back into place. So it's a lot easier to install. The CTs are going to wrap around the feeders to the service entrance. So that's the toughest part, putting those CTs on the feeders to the service entrance. So we use a split cord CT, so they should snap into place. And once you do it a couple times, you're kind of used to it. The CTs are going to have arrows on them, and you basically want to make sure those arrows always point towards the grid. So not towards your home loads, but towards the meter, essentially. All right. Once everything's installed, it's time to verify. We want to make sure that everything is installed correctly, that we've got communications. So we're going to turn on that AC breaker, that 2-pole 15 amp breaker. The meter should be pre-configured just to make everything easier, but I always like to double check. So you can verify your cellular connection by using the 4 gray buttons on the CCG, and you can scroll down to the server status screen. That's what this screen is, and make sure it says cellular and then SOK. The RS485-1-1 port should be open. This is intended for once you have the inverter installed. But if you're coming out, this is like Mike said, we're trying to eliminate that waiting room. And so your electrician's out the next day or a couple days after, and he's installing this, he or she is installing this, and then we'll come back at a later date and install the inverter. So RS485-1 should be open. And you can just make sure that the termination resistor is in the on position. Again, it should be. And then just verify that it says okay and it's ready for the inverter when you are. RS485-2, now this port is talking to the consumption meter, the import-export meter that is installed inside of the enclosure. So you should see some wires running to the meter. It is pre-configured. So you verify that RS485-2 is connected to a meter, so make sure it says status okay. And then you can scroll down to the communication menu and see that, okay, there's 2 RS485 ports, they're talking to SolarEdge devices, and if it's communicating, it'll say 1, because you're talking to 1 device, okay? If you have a larger service entrance and you're installing on a 400 amp service entrance, the CT setting is set to default to 200. So you're just going to have to change the CT rating. Same thing if you're going on one of those 225 amp solar ready, quote unquote, solar ready service entrances, make sure it's set to 225 or whatever the rating of your CT is. Okay, so now that the hardware is installed, we basically need to create the site on the monitoring portal to get the data to the customer. Now there's a couple of ways to do it. And first I'm going to walk you through new site creation. So the electrician goes to site, finishes the installation, take a picture of the serial number of the device, so that way you have it for this site creation. You're going to log into the monitoring portal. You're going to click your create new site button, and then you're going to enter the details. So you're going to put the site ID, the site name. What I generally do for peak power, you can put 0 if you don't know what it's going to be, but you know your customer signed a contract, your sales guy has probably a quote that says you're going to get the 7K, the 8K, or the 9K system. So I'm going to put whatever is on the quote. And notice that the entry is kilowatts and not watts. So you want to make sure you put 7.4 kilowatts. And I've seen it a couple of times where somebody writes 7,400 watts. And so they write 7,400, and now the system thinks it's 7,400 kilowatts or 7.4 megawatts, which skews all your data. All right, for the revenue calculation, if you don't know what that is, you can leave it blank. But again, part of that stickiness and keeping that cancellation rate low is that dollar value that Mike talked about. We want to spend that money. So flat rate is basically all we can do. So we can't do a time of use rate yet, but a flat rate, and you're going to put a flat rate for whatever the dollars per kilowatt hour is. So in this example, we use 18 cents per kilowatt hour. And then the installation date. Notice that the installation date is the meter installed date, not the PV installation date. So that's important to note. If you used your designer, so if your sales guy opened up the SolarEdge designer, created the site layout, put the modules on the roof, has the estimated production in the report, you will see this beautiful 3D image that has the proposed solar system on it. So what I recommend is use that image. It allows the homeowner to see this is what my house is going to look like once I've got that PV system on it. Okay, so as you guys know, if you're SolarEdge users, we've always been asked for serial numbers. So if you put your module manufacturer, again, you can put that in if you think what it's going to be. You'll see the inverter serial number check marked, and you might see the gateway unchecked. So since this is a gateway, we're going to check the gateway box and uncheck the inverter, because again, the inverter is not installed yet. And then we're going to add the serial number of the gateway. So the installer took a picture of the gateway and of the serial number, and now we're going to input that information for the site creation. Okay, so if you choose to use the designer, which is again my preferred method, so if I'm a sales guy, I'm gonna use the designer, do a quick layout, add the serial number for the meter to portal creation. So there's an option that basically says, when you're done using the designer, there's an option that says export to portal. So basically it creates a site on the portal for you. So you export it to the portal, and then you go back log into the monitoring portal, click on the site that you created, so the new site, right? And you're going to go to the admin tab, and then you're going to click on logical layout, and then you're going to click on the add button, and you see these two same checkmark boxes, inverters or gateways. So you're going to check the gateway and input the serial number for the gateway, and then click create. So updating the energy estimates. So we want to know, like, these dollar values. If your system was installed, how much money would you be saving? So if you used the designer, you will have all of the monthly estimates. So for the month of January, we expect your system to produce this, and February, so on and so forth. So just, input those values. Now, we don't automatically input those values from the designer yet, but it's absolutely something that would make sense that we do. So I'm sure we're working on it, but I can double check that we're working on it. So you just input those values manually. So if you print off the report or just open it up on another window, because I like to save paper, then I'm just going to copy and paste those values over, click save, and now you get this immediate feedback on the app. So the app will say, okay, this is how much energy you're consuming total this month and today, and then if you had solar, this is how much energy you would be producing, and this is how much money you would be saving, and your environmental savings. So it gives you that feedback. So here it is on the portal again. I know you guys have seen this screenshot a couple times. So on the portal, you as the installer can track the home's energy usage. And we always try to plan for basically bringing the customer down to zero, because if you're back feeding or exporting a whole bunch of energy to the grid, it may not make a lot of fiscal sense. Well, your homeowner is getting excited about their energy, and they're getting excited about their solar system, so they may start using more energy, and you can track it. And maybe your system's a little undersized. So when you go back out during the installation, maybe you can get that one more module on the roof. And SolarEdge has a lot of design flexibility for that. And then you have the data that shows, yeah, your energy habits changed from our last conversation. So maybe it's worth one more module. So the product status. So we're going to release this in Q4. So it's coming to the local distributor near you very shortly. Here's the part number. It's called the SE Meter 240. Basically, it's just an energy meter. Okay, so consumption monitoring with PV. So once you have the PV system installed, you can add a consumption meter. And this is, so we spent the whole basically webinar talking about our cellular meter. Now this is just a consumption meter. So it's got all the same functionality, except it doesn't have its own cellular connection, and it doesn't have a CCG. So you're basically going to use the inverter's monitoring plan. So if you install the cell card in the inverter, or you're using Ethernet in the inverter, that's how you're going to get the data to the portal. Now, why is this important? Mike alluded to it earlier that homeowners' energy habits change once they have PV installed, and we've all seen it. I've seen it so many times. One of my customers put in that pool that he always wanted and started running a pool pump, every night, and then called me and said, "I'm not seeing the savings you said I would see." And then we had to have that conversation. Oh, when did the pool go in? And so we can track those energy habits using the portal. I had another customer that turned his uninsulated golf cart garage into a wine cellar, but he didn't insulate any of the walls. So his energy habits just went through the roof. And he thought that, maybe his utility was billing him for the solar that he produced. And so we were having those tough conversations. So I always recommend a consumption meter on every installation. So let's look at production versus consumption. So in this example, we have a battery. So of course, if you have a battery, consumption meter, import export meter is always going to be required, just so we can see and control what the battery is doing. So we can see here that the green is just during the day. You can see solar energy produced and maybe stored in a battery. That's what the light green is. And then the blue represents how much energy was self-consumed. So of that solar energy, how many of it went to my home loads? How much of it went to my home loads? And then on the right-hand side here, you can see, hey, when there was no solar energy, I was using my battery to power these loads. We represent that same information in bar graphs, so you just have a general understanding of how much solar energy was consumed, a percentage, how much solar energy was exported to the grid as a percentage, and then the consumption again, how much solar and battery energy was consumed, and then how much energy was purchased from the utility company. So I think that brings it to an end. Do we have any questions? Mike, I wasn't reading any of the questions while you were presenting. I usually do that and then respond while you present, but I was kind of slow on the uptake this time.
Yeah, I've got it all here. I mean, as usual, we tend to cover a lot of this stuff, but it bears repeating. One of the things on this RS-45 energy meter that's kind of nice is it's available now. Cameron mentioned the cellular one as Q4, but if you're interested in getting, I'd say arguably most of the benefits once it's installed, once the PV is installed, you can still get those benefits with the energy meter. And I have actually seen this firsthand where it's been requested. So I had a solar system go in last year, and my kids were looking at the monitoring, and one of my kids looked at it and said, "Wow, we use a lot of energy." I'm like, "No, this is the solar production. This is how much we make." And my other daughter, she looked at it and said, "Well, it'd be really cool if we could see how much we were consuming." I was like, "Well, yeah, we have a product to do that too." Um, so this is the product to do that. And I think if it's already kids are understanding it, who are teenage kids. I think it's going to be pretty wide acceptance from the market. And there were a couple questions early on. I think we hit this, but is it possible to avoid putting the GSM card in the inverter if you already have the GSM card on the meter?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we plan the data plan around that. So we don't want you to have to buy two cell cards. So the cell card that's inside the cellular meter or the energy meter will report the information from the inverter once it's installed to the monitoring portal. So you are going to have to run an RS-485 data cable from the inverter to the gateway enclosure and connect it to RS-45-1 port on the CCG, but that's super low cost, and it's like, you have 3,300 feet of distance before we have to maybe look at a different solution. So you got a long way to run that cable if you needed a long way to run that cable. But yeah, use the cell card that's provided for inverter reporting.
Yep. And in terms of data plans, we'll have more information on the data plans as we get closer to launch. I think there's some questions here on bandwidth. There are different bandwidth plans. So the idea right now that we're looking at is for the first year, you'll have high bandwidth, which means you get an update, kind of almost instantaneously. It's every 15 minutes of the polling. And that'll be good for a year. And then we're looking to maybe transition to another one. But as we get closer to launching this product and get the product in market, we'll have more information on the data plans. I did see a couple questions on that in here as well.
Yeah.
For okay, this is a one kind of getting into the data plan idea. But if you have multiple inverters on site, do you need one of these? And you're using this for the communications. Do you need one of these for each inverter?
Ooh, okay. So That's interesting. So I'd have to double check on the data plan and how that's affected if you have multiple inverters. My understanding as of right now, it's meant to be one inverter. So you're just going to run one RS-45 cable from one inverter to the meter. But if we had multiple inverters, let's say we had two inverters, then you'd RS-45 the two inverters together, and then one inverter or the other inverter to the CCG. I'd have to double check on the data plan to see if
Yeah.
it supports multiple inverters.
Well, I think that's the only thing that is to be determined is kind of these data plans. One device can't support multiple inverters, and one card can support multiple inverters. It's just going to be, you'll have a standard data plan that will include with this card. If you're doing any kind of upgrades, and this is a case where you would look at doing an upgrade for multiple inverters, you're just looking to expand the data plan.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's
And it
kind
should
of
be
a yes and no. Yes with upgrade.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so we covered the bandwidth. So there's kind of another data plan button or a data plan idea. So this question is about the green button data. This is something I've looked into. Have you looked into the green button data, Cameron?
No, the
So
green
you
button
can
data.
get, you get a solar system installed. You can go on to, I know PG&E has it. I think a couple other utilities have it, where you can look at similar data directly from the utility. And I'd say that there are some similarities to it in that it kind of checks off the basics. Like you can see your general consumption and you can see it through the day. However, it's not integrated with solar, and it's also um, not as easy to get to. So it's not a you kind of have to go into PG&E, you have to log in, you've got to go a couple pages deep, look at the graphs, know what to look for, change your sorting and filters. Where this is easier to get access to, it's integrated. When you see it overlaid on top with the solar production, it's just more useful because you can get a better idea of when you're self-consuming, which will go into that time of use category. It's just more visible. It's easier to tell what's going on. So I think that's sort of how I would compare it to the green button data. Do we support time of use rates? So I think you hit on this one for the scheduling already.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, of course we support time of use rates for telling a battery when to charge and discharge. As of right now, when you're doing your calculations for how much money you're saving, it's a flat rate only. So basically, it's not even a tier rate; it's a flat rate that says your energy is worth 18 cents per kilowatt hour. But most of us talk to our homeowners, and we know on average what their bill is looking like. So you might use the weighted average of your homeowner's energy profile. The only time that becomes a problem is if it's a new homeowner, they just took possession of the home, so they don't have those old energy habits. That's the only time I've seen that not work. But most of us have tools to guide us on how big of a PV system they need. So you're going to use those same type of tools for that energy estimation or that dollar value estimation.
This one's one it's close to my heart. What happens if you have bus bars coming from the utility meter into the breaker?
Yeah, that's a good question because you can't put a split core CT around those bus bars too easily. So we're going to have Rogowski coil integration. So it's a cable CT that a lot easier to install. Right now, you lose a little bit of accuracy when you use those Rogowski coils, but at the time of launch, we will support the Rogowski coils.
Yeah, and that's one I have at my house too. So when you have those Rogowski coils ready for beta test, give me a call.
Sure.
I'd be excited to use them. Can this monitoring device use the same breaker as the PV system?
Can it use the same breaker? So you'd have to be careful, but not all breakers are rated for having two cables landed in the same terminal block. But if it is rated for that, then by all means use the same breaker. It doesn't use a lot of energy and it's a draw. Sure, I understand, wanting to protect that valuable, breaker space. The most important part is we need to measure it's basically a voltage sensor is what it is. And we need to be able to measure voltage on line 1 and line 2. So as long as you're hitting both phases, your breaker is rated for having 2 conductors landed into it. 2 conductors of different sizes landed into it. Because let's say you put your PV breaker in, you're running a 7.6. What is that, 8 gauge? And then on your on your cellular meter, I guess you'd have to run 8 gauge instead of that 12 gauge. Yeah, I don't see why not. Possible.
All right. How does this solution compare to others like Sense or other consumption monitors?
It's awesome. That's how it compares.
So
How
I'd
does it
say
compare
it's
to?
similar.
Yeah,
It's kind of like the green button data, though. It's
yeah,
similar in that they can provide you some basic consumption profile. I mean, what you're getting with this is a little bit more industrial in its design, though. You've got cellular, which you don't have on these other devices. It just it's in its own enclosure. It's more like an industrial type of solution where something like Sense you'd buy on Amazon is a little bit more of a homeowner style solution.
right. So I would say to mirror what you were saying, Mike, absolutely. So you get the enclosure. So you get someplace that is already safe for all this equipment to go in. You get one place to monitor your solar and your consumption. And let's say you buy that EV charger through SolarEdge, or that's the inverter that's going in. Then you also are able to control your car from the same monitoring portal app. So it's all about understanding how we're using our energy. SolarEdge is a smart energy company, and as we get more devices out there, it's all controlled from the same place. So, I'm a big fan of full integration, and I have a lot of Google devices in my house, so I use my Google Nest instead of my Alexa, if that makes sense. So I don't like to cross brand platforms, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
This one's kind of nice. Well, I think this is more setup. So, how do you get the data to show? Is there anything that you need to do in the monitoring platform? Like, do you need to add a device, for example?
Yeah, so once you add the serial number of the gateway to the platform, that's how we know, that's how we track there you go. Once you add that serial number, once you add that serial number, that's how we know that the data from that house goes to this site. So that's how we collect the data.
And this would be true for the RS-45 if you were adding it on later.
Yeah, so if you add that inverter, so again, you check mark the inverter and then enter the serial number of the inverter.
And then you add the gateway, and you can add that in here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's see. I think we got to a couple of these already. A lot of these are more than one inverter, so get ready for those data plans.
Yeah, I know.
So the idea is with this, you would daisy chain the inverters together with this device through RS-45, and then you would configure this device to be the master, and then is that basically what you would end up doing?
Yeah, exactly right. So the CCG or the gateway is always going to be the master, and I know we're using antiquated computer jargon for standard Modbus protocol, but long story short, the 2 inverters would be the slaves, the CCG would be the master, and you just run a slave detect, and I can't wait until we change that terminology.
All right. Is it only compatible with SolarEdge inverters?
Huh.
Not really. I mean, the cellular one, because it's a standalone product,
Yeah.
install it with anything. It's just you've got 2 apps then. You've basically got data coming in on a SolarEdge app, and then you've got your other, well, or if you don't have a solar system, you could install this as a standalone device.
I
The-
wonder, that's a good question. I wonder if you could get the inverter production data as a SunSpec alliance. That's an interesting thought that I don't think that I accounted for, because why would you not have SolarEdge, right?
well, if you're not
I
going to go with solar, like let's say for whatever well, I'm kind of implying something into this question that maybe isn't here. But let's say the customer doesn't want to go solar, but still wants to see their consumption. This would still it'd work fine.
Yeah, totally. I think what the question is revolving around is, what if I have an existing system that may have been a different product, like a SMA or
Oh yeah.
Enphase or something like that? Can I still get the data? I think it'd be difficult for microinverters because they don't. I don't know. I don't know how they aggregate the data to a SunSpec device. But if you had like an SMA or Fronis or a string inverter, I think they all are required to speak SunSpec Alliance Modbus, and I think you could do that to the CCG. I don't see why you couldn't. Just read it as a SunSpec device, and we would be able to. I think we might be able to do that, but man, now I got to double check.
You're writing down the requirements for our next product integration meeting.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, well, this is interesting. So if the homeowner does have an Ethernet connection, can you use the GSM as like backup?
As a backup.
Like
So we've actually had a lot of emerging requests for this. So use the GSM as a fail-safe or a backup if Ethernet goes away for whatever reason. So as of right now, no, there's no way to do it, but it is something that we're looking into as a background call if we needed it.
let's see here. I think we've gotten close to. There's a question about demand charges. So, for this product, what you're looking at with demand charges is just any 15-minute interval during a month can spoil your whole month in terms of your billing cycle. So you want to look
Yeah.
at spikes in the energy usage.
Yeah, and power usage. So
Oh,
if you
yeah.
go back, yeah,
Well,
if you go back to the one of the graphs.
we can argue about that. Anything over an interval is energy, but
Yeah,
they call it
yeah. They call it power, right? If you go back to, I think I still have control. Do I still have control? Yeah, I do. Okay, hold on. Let me get to one of these graphs. Okay, here we go. So if you're looking at the rate input, you're not going to be able to, again, it's flat rate only, right? But if we can start looking at the energy from the homeowner, and we can start seeing these spikes. So this is a good example. You can see the spike happened almost 5 kilowatts. Now this person was lucky enough to have a battery. So the battery helped offset a lot of that spike. So what would be the demand would only be like a half a kilowatt. But if we look at here, then we can clearly see, okay, this did spike. This was imported from the grid. So that demand would be 2.5 kilowatts in this case. Now you'd obviously want 30 days of usage, and you'd want to call out those spikes. And maybe this would be a good time for you to analyze, well, does a demand manager make sense? I'm installing this PV system with this battery, and we're still getting spikes of 6, 7, 20 kilowatts if your homeowner is cycling their split level, 2-story home with 2 air conditioning units and pool pump all at the same time, and while running their arc welder, whatever the reason may be, they're causing these spikes. Maybe you talk to them and say, well, why don't we change your pool pump to run at night when you're not in that time of use window or on that demand, or basically offset the times that it runs, so you're not hitting it with the air conditioner as well. That causes those high demand spikes. I'm going to guess that guy was in Arizona.
probably. This question is about, can you retrofit previous installations with the meter, and which one would you retrofit it with?
Yeah, so you can retrofit, absolutely you can retrofit previous installations. Now, if it's a SolarEdge inverter, super simple, and you already have like a Zigbee gateway, or you already have Ethernet set up, or you already have a cell card, I would use the RS-45 energy meter, the one you see here. If you don't have comms to the site, then this is a good opportunity to get comms to the site. And I would say, yeah, use the cellular meter so you can get that data to your customers.
And kind of in the same idea, there's another question. If you have multiple inverters and they're connected through Ethernet, um, you would just need, how many meters would you need if you're doing this RS-45?
Multiple inverters, yeah. If it's connected via Ethernet, yeah, just do a daisy chain, Modbus RS-45 daisy chain. If you're using Ethernet, so
And you just
up
need
to
the 1 meter.
yeah, just 1 meter, up to 32 devices in total. So 1 meter and 31 inverters.
Can this be installed outdoors?
Absolutely, NEMA 3R.
All right. And I think
And that was an easy softball question. I like those.
we've kind of hit on a lot of the other stuff here.
Oh, the reason they asked, look at this slide. It has a bullet mounted inside NEMA 3. Oh, the meter is mounted inside a NEMA 3R enclosure.
But the whole box can be put outside.
Yeah, the whole box can be put outside. Absolutely right.
Okay, I think we've kind of gotten through all of it. If you do want to find out more about this, just reach out to us. Use the SolarEdge number extension 3. That'll get you to our inside sales team, and they can kind of get a little bit deeper into what this technology can do or can't do. Maybe clarifying some of the questions in case we did not get to it on the webinar. But thank you guys for joining us. It was a very fun webinar. Cameron, great job as always.
Yeah, Mike, man, you crushed it. So good job to you as well. And thank you for joining us, everyone on the line. I had a good time.
Last thing before we go, if you are interested in the slides or recording of the webinar, we will send out a survey. Let us know how we're doing and how we can improve. And then we'll send you the slides. If you want the link to the recording, we will provide that. Just contact our inside sales team and they'll have the link.
Yeah, I say I only give you the presentation if you give me a 5, then you get the presentation.
Good luck with that.
All right, take it easy, Mike. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.